Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kimberly Madden. I'm the Executive Director of the Micro Business Association of New England, and I'm joined today by Dr. Iswani Amici and Kino Mullings of the Mullings Group. And we're going to be discussing today cash flow management. And so, without further ado, Dr. Iswani, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. I really appreciate it, and thank you, Kino. I'm excited about our conversation today. Kimberly shared, we'll be talking about cash flow management, particularly for micro businesses. And so I'm going to kind of share a few things like what is cash flow management, what are the categories of cash flow, and then why is it important? And of course, I'll hand it over to Kino, who kind of will have like our conversations and we'll go from there. I'm like, really, really excited about what we're going to be talking about today. So cash flow management is really the process of tracking the cash that comes in and out of your business. It's really, when you think about it, it goes that way. Whatever cash that comes into your business and the cash that goes out of your business. And there's a link also for when you think of cash flow to your income statement and your balance sheet. I always tell people, the story I always tell is that, hey, the why cash flow is important is because you probably got a contract, for $100,000, which is like, woohoo, high five in your within your organization and within your team that you got this contract. But then you realize that you're not getting paid for another 6 months. But this project or this contract needs to be completed within that time frame, before then. And so what happens? And so your cash flow will help you to understand how much you have at hand now, because in your income statement, yes, it shows that you have this money, sitting there, but not in your cash flow. You don't have the money physically. And so it's like, do I go get a line of credit? Do I, where do I get money to be able to insert into my business to be able to pay people, buy the supplies and all the things that you need in order to complete this project. So again, that's one of the things that cash flow management allows you to do. It also shows you cash that is available at the beginning of the period. There are some categories of or types of cash flow. Cash flow from operating expense, that is like cash from sales of products and services and all that. There's cash flow from investing activities. When you have you're borrowing or money or like sales of assets or stocks. And then there is cash flow from financing activities, which is when you maybe taxes or loans or purchase of assets and stuff like that. And it leaves you with, again, cash at the end of that particular period. So with that, I will be handing this over to to tell us more about, like, his business. Is going to use his business as a way to kind of share more about what we're talking about right now. Kino?
All right, good stuff, Iswani. Thank you. So, like Kimberly said, I'm the CEO of the Mullings Group, a software development company here in Providence, Rhode Island, and I'm the founder of IEL, Institute of Entrepreneurship and Leadership. So, we teach entrepreneurship in a that practical way, and I'm living the life with the Mullings Group. And boy, cash flow, it's one of those things that keeps every entrepreneur, every micro business entrepreneur up at night. And I realized that my cash flow it went from when it's just me, right? All my only cash flow worries is, can I pay my software, right? Your $10 a month, whatever software you're using. Can you maintain that subscription? And can you pay yourself? Can you make a living off of it? And some businesses that are funded, well, they probably don't have that tight problem because there's money in reserves. But for the vast majority of businesses, there is no reserve, right? You're just doing it, and hopefully you don't have to use a credit card. I am a believer in not using credit cards. I haven't used a credit card in the last 8 years. It is possible to live without credit cards. I think it's a trap in and of itself. Separate from line of credit for your business, it's a whole different. And I suppose a credit card can be used as such, but personally, I don't use credit cards. So, but the thing is, when you're looking at cash flow, it's just you. It's different as you start adding team members, because now you have somebody to pay and they're expecting payment once their service is done. And you get paid from your clients, then you have that money coming to your business and the money goes back out. Cash flow at its simplest is money coming in, money going out, and do you have enough money to go out? Right? Is the money coming in before it has to go out? And that's the cash flow game that we play as micro business entrepreneurs. I can tell you some mistakes I've made with cash flow management is, you'll have big contracts and you're like, oh, you're excited, there's all this money coming in, but you're not paying attention of that there's a lot of money also going out. So your net profit isn't as big as you think, right? So your gross is increasing really fast, but your net might not be increasing as fast because you're hiring more people. So that's cash flow pit number one, is the perception of growth when there really isn't necessarily growth, because your net can also shrink when your gross increases because you're paying more people. Right. So that's one cash flow pit. The second cash flow pit is not paying attention to when things are due. Because if you're not paying attention to when things are due, you could end up with some zero bank accounts, or just growth. I've actually been in a situation, a company I worked at, where growth almost bankrupt the company because they're making so much money. Their clients pay them in 60 days, but they had to pay their contractors the next week.
Right.
So growth was problematic. And so, so there's ways you can work around that part. And I'll talk about that in a second. So with those two pitfalls in mind, what do you use to track your cash flow? Well, of course, the go-to tool is QuickBooks. Everyone will recommend QuickBooks. I say save your money. QuickBooks is great. Personally, I like Wave apps. I like it because it's free. I like it because it's just as secure. It's not double entry bookkeeping, it's single entry bookkeeping. So if you're not an accountant or you don't need that sort of detail in your bookkeeping, single entry bookkeeping with a tool like Wave works perfectly for me. I can still pull my financial statements, which is all my accountant cares about, right? I can give him my profit and loss, I can give him my balance sheet, and he can do whatever tax documents that's needed to be done. So that's my personal thought. I suppose one day I may graduate to QuickBooks, but for now I don't have to. And so to help with my cash flow, I spend as little as possible. So one thing you can do to lower your cash flow, as I transition into talking about cash flow management and tracking, is if you don't need it, don't buy it. Right? If you don't have to spend on that subscription, if you don't have to, buy that new widget, if you don't have to do these things to lower your expenses, it is, unless you're spending it on your brain, right? Learning is always something that goes towards increasing your bottom line. But if you, reduce your spending as much as possible, do these things that you can to reduce your cash flow, collaborate, volunteer, trade services, whatever you can do as a micro business entrepreneur that you can do to reduce your overall cash flow. So now going back to, managing cash flow, QuickBooks, Wave apps, and there are other tools out there that you can use to really keep an eye on your profit and loss. But the day-to-day spend is, Wani, I find a good old spreadsheet.
Thank you.
Because these tools, they're great at giving you a snapshot, but when you have to do that projection as to, okay, here are the invoices that are supposed to come in on time, and we all know they don't always, right? These are the invoices that are supposed to come in. These are the payments that are also due. You can start to see the holes in your cash flow where you're going to be short here, or you have a surplus here. Don't spend that surplus, because that surplus is going to be needed down the road for some expenses. And so the third thing that which really is highlighted here is fiscal discipline. Because, not because money is in your business bank account, it means you can spend it. And a lot of micro business entrepreneurs, there's a very short line between your business account and your personal account, right? It's not like with larger companies, you got a payroll and there's a process and so forth. for micro business entrepreneurs, you know, you're asking permission to get money from your business. You're asking yourself, or you're asking one person. So fiscal discipline is so important, that your business money is your business money. And be very methodical, be very structured about how you spend that business money. And a good old spreadsheet just to lay it out, it works wonders. I haven't found a tool to beat that. And you know, now as you know, our team is growing and we have to pay even more attention to money coming in, money coming out. I find myself gravitating back to a good old spreadsheet to say, all right, this is the planning that has to be done. And you know, another thing with cash flow as well, don't fool yourself when it comes to sales projections, right? I mean, we're optimistic, and you know, sometimes when we do our projections and we put those sales projections on our cash flow, we can get into trouble because we think you're going to get 20% market share. Well, how about you start at 3% and you know, work your way up? Or how about you use your trend of sales to project your sales? So if you realize that you're only selling one widget per month, don't project 10 unless you have some strategy that's going to get you from 1 to 10. So another point is cash flow and your strategy should be really tightly aligned. Because if you're a lot of times as micro business entrepreneurs, we haven't gone to business school. We don't have, you know, a Dr. Iswani to give, you know, to have a phone call. Hey, what should I do here? You know, we do things that are very tactical. Like, you know, I know I'm supposed to have a website. I know I'm supposed to advertise on social media. I know I'm supposed to have these things. And so we spend all this money without a strategy. I highly recommend the Balance Scorecard, by the way, and Strategy Map. Love those tools. But developing a strategy to say, this is where, from my mission and vision, this is where I want my company to be. And now, how is that reflected on the cash flow? Can my cash flow support the implementation of my strategy? And the success of my strategy should also be reflected in my cash flow. And so I think, you know, I look forward to the day where, you know, from a business milestone perspective, you know, you have these different milestones. Like one, the business can take care of itself. You don't have to put personal funds in. You celebrate the child who is now paying their own bills. Then the next business milestone is you have enough reserves that you can pay your operational cost and your fixed, your variable costs, your employees, your team members, without worrying about, hey, if I don't get this invoice in, I can't make this payment. And you know, so that's another celebration. And then the next celebration is you now have extra in your cash flow that you can start innovating and making yourself, your product and your service even much better, and gain more market share. Now, so I talked about pitfalls. I talked about the practicality of tracking your cash flow using tools like QuickBooks, Wave Apps, and your spreadsheet. So what do you do if there is a hole, right? You did your projections and there's a negative somewhere in your cash flow. First thing, you go pray. You know, that's what I do all the time. All right, how am I going to fill this hole? But there's some other creative things that you can do. You can talk to your clients. You can say, can you pay early, right? Now, talking to your clients to fix your cash flow puts you at a disadvantage because now your clients have leverage and you can leave money on the table. You can lose money, right? You can offer things like, hey, if you pay early, I'll give you X% discount, right? Because sometimes it's not that if you had all the money, like if January 1, you had all the money that your profit and loss says you're going to have on December 31, you'll be great, right? Because you have all that cash and you just spend it accordingly throughout the year. So you're really just trying to move money forward. You're trying to get money today because $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. So you're trying to get that money forward. So talking to your clients, I think, is a great way to bring money forward. In our business, net 30, I don't like. Net 30, net 60, I try to structure our contracts that we get paid weekly or bi-weekly. So even though it's smaller drips throughout the month, but it's cash flow, right? So if you have, you know, lots of people giving you small amounts then it's bringing the money into the future versus pushing it off to the end. Now, my clients probably would prefer net 30 or net 60. And but there's that happy middle, right? If you can pull it into net 15, I think it would help with cash flow. Certainly that's helped us. We used to push things out far apart. But once we pulled it in, every 2 weeks, it's, we're a software development company. So we just have to show deliverables, show the deliverables, knock it out the park, and keep clients happy. And every 2 weeks, we're pulling something in. I think that has been really helpful in plugging that hole.
So you have shared a lot, and
Yes,
I've
I
made
did.
I know, and I appreciate that, and I've made some notes that I would like to kind of follow up with you. But the first thing I reacted the way I did when you mentioned spreadsheet is because I share that with my students. I tell them because you hear about so when you mentioned QuickBooks and Wave, I was like, oh no, he's not gonna mention the spreadsheet. So I was very, very happy when that was a good reaction that, when I heard you say that, because I tell my students, I don't think people understand the power, like all the things that Excel can do. And I say to them, if you do not understand it, and I there is we do teach it in our class, in our school. But if you don't understand it, go and invest in it and learn it. Get on YouTube if you have to, to add to the knowledge you already have, because that tool, it will help you a lot.
Yeah. And if you can't afford Excel, use Google Sheets.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So there are things out there, that can definitely help you. But then you also mentioned, the cash flow and strategy. I want to kind of have you to explain a little bit more about that. When you say to make sure that your cash flow aligns with your strategy, I believe that's what you said. So
yes.
Tell us more a little bit.
So, for strategic planning, we use a tool called the Balance Scorecard. And the Balance Scorecard looks at strategy from financial perspective and non-financial perspective. So financial perspective, what is your strategy, your goal, your objectives? How are you going to measure those objectives? What's your target, and what are the things you're going to do to hit that target? So you measure those goals financially, from the eyes of your customer, from the lens of your internal processes, from the lens of your team and your team growth and innovation, and also some other metrics, if you so chose. We add community as one of our metrics as well. Now, our strategy, like our financial strategy, our goal is to increase the number of new projects per cycle. Okay, why are we doing that? What's our objectives? Well, we want to increase revenue and net profit. All right, how are we going to measure that? Well, we're going to measure that from, we have a tool that we use to track new projects in the pipeline, so that we can look at, are we getting new work? We can measure that from our profit and loss statement. Are we increasing in revenue and net? And then, we had certain targets. Now, that strategy alone reflects on our cash flow. Like, we can't have one new project every month, because every new project has new team members or resources associated with that. If we don't have the money for those resources, then we can't execute on that strategy. So we have to make sure that our cash flow can sustain that strategy, or figure out how to raise capital, which is one of the things that we're doing, going through a capital raise, raise the funds that you need, either equity or debt or whatever, or issues, shares. How do you raise the capital to bridge the gap, where if projects are coming in and we can't afford the clients, and we have to slow that down, which kills your strategy. So that's one way in which it's the alignment. As growth is where it really comes into play, where your strategy is geared towards growth. You have to be able to sustain that growth. And the measure, like I set targets, right? So I should see these number of dollars, or this increase in profit. Well, I should see that on my cash flow as well. I should see the revenue spiking, especially if you do new marketing plans. So if you're implementing a marketing initiative that's supposed to get to your bottom line, you should see a correlation with a spike in your cash flow with the execution of said marketing plan.
Very, very true. Thank you very much. I also wanted you were talking about talking to your clients, before you talked about how money comes in every 2 weeks for you adopted that strategy. So in my research, I actually learned of a business that started doing that. They said that their advice was to, instead of just going for that 30, like the industry standard, actually tell your clients or whoever it is that you're working with what it is that you want it to be. You get to set it. And that way, you have, again, money in your account, instead of having to go back to them and say, oh, if you give it to me today, I'll give you X percent, because that doesn't really, work. It wouldn't work out well.
And you can make it a win-win by extending the terms.
Okay.
So increase the frequency of payments, but I'll give you longer time to pay. Because a lot of times you just need that cash, you just need that money now, right?
Right.
So you can handle stretching it out, because it helps with your fiscal discipline. Because
Right.
if you don't have the money there to tempt you, you won't spend it, or you won't allocate it for some emergency. So you stretch those payments out. There's some consistency in your cash flow, and it really helps your planning.
Very, very true. I'm going to stop for a minute and ask if Kimberly have anything to share with us.
The aligning your strategy with your overall cash flow, I think, is so important, because some people forget that step. I know with marketing, as I was working with paid search campaigns, we would launch initiatives and we wouldn't necessarily factor in the overall strategy. So it was, it's definitely a major point. It's definitely a major point. So I'm glad that you brought that up, Iswani and Kino.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have additional questions for you, Kino.
Go ahead.
Are you able to make a link between the three, financial statements? Like how does cash flow, or how does the income statement, kind of work with the balance sheet, and then all the way to cash flow? What is the connection? What is the link between all?
You want to embarrass me now, don't
No,
you?
no, please. That is not.
All right, here's the thing.
I would never do that.
Personally, I don't look at my balance sheet.
Tell me more. That's interesting.
Because as a micro business, where we're very cash flow sensitive, the balance sheet doesn't give me that picture on a moment by moment basis.
Okay.
Profit and loss can give me that picture. My cash flow can give me that picture. But the document that I look at most often is not the balance sheet. It's cash flow and P&L.
Okay.
To see, how are we doing health-wise? And now as we're moving into using more spreadsheet to spread out that planning, and it's actually something that we're doing now. We didn't before. We just looked at profit and loss and look at when things are coming in and out. But now we're using the spreadsheet for cash flow. That's the document that we look at most. Actually, the number one tool that we look at from a business management perspective is our strategy document.
Okay.
Like if we're not moving according to strategy, then we're wasting time. The next tool that we look at is our burn rate. How are we spending money on our team? And then it's the cash flow, P&L, profit and loss, income statement. But the balance sheet, I hardly look at. I know it's important, right? I can print one if you need it, but from my seat and what occupies or gives me anxiety, the balance sheet, I can get the information elsewhere, and I don't need my balance sheet. Yeah.
No worries. I appreciate the answer, and it's okay. No worries at all. But I do want to ask one last question, and this particular question is about you mentioned, again, back to my excitement with using a spreadsheet. Tell our viewers how do you you open up this thing and you see these lines looking at you. What do you do with it? How do you start? Where do you start? Are you able to? We're not asking you to give us like the entire tutorial, but
there's a lot of templates out there.
Okay.
That you can use. I've developed one over the years that we use at IEL. If you take Bootcamp, you get a free template. Shameless plug. So there are lots of templates out there. But okay, to be practical, micro business entrepreneur, start with your personal budget.
Good.
right? Look at your personal budget. There's money coming in, there's
Good.
money going out.
Good.
Your business is very similar. Your business is an entity, an organism by itself.
Yes.
How is your business getting money in, and where's your business putting money going out? So you start there. List the ins and the outs and the details in between. That's as simple as you can get. And then you decide what periods you're going to track. So monthly, I think, well, depending on your business, some businesses go monthly. I can't do monthly. I have to do weekly because of the nature of what we do and how often we pay our contractors. So I go on a weekly basis. Bi-weekly might work for you as well. So you pick that period. Just like your personal budget. You should never do a monthly budget. It never works. You do a budget that's per paycheck, right? And so it's the same thing with the business. If you do it aligned with those pay cycles. So what's coming in, what's going out, pick your cycles, and then let's say you do it for 6 months. Beyond 6 months, I think, because you're going to do so many revisions, I think 3 to 6 months is a good window. And again, this is for micro business entrepreneurs. I'm assuming a particular size. As you get larger, some of these things will change. And as you're really small, some of these things are not necessary. So 3 to 6 months, and you map out what you know. Like, you're going to pay for Buffer if you use that tool. Or if you use QuickBooks, you're going to pay for QuickBooks. These things will always come up. So you put those on your cash flow. In terms of your team members, if they're on salary, well, that's fixed. If they're not on salary, then you need some other tool to track or to give you what's the average amount you spend per cycle on your team. And there's an average. It goes up, it goes down, but there's an average. Then you use that average as your payment. And then for the clients that you already have, you put in the income that and when you should expect it. Now, always underestimate your income, overestimate your expenses. And after a while, you'll start to know those clients that pay on time. So you need to make the adjustments for that, because that could really mess up your cash flow. If you need a check today, but you're not getting it for 2 weeks and you're depending on it today. So that could mess up your cash flow. So you need to know your clients. Don't tell them you're putting that buffer in there though, because they'll take advantage of that. But just know your clients and put those buffers in there. So SBA also has, great templates, but keep it simple. You should understand your own cash flow, not your accountant, not anyone else, not, the little voice in your head that you're not doing business correctly. You need to understand this tool. And so I highly encourage, just keep it simple and evolve. Just let the tool evolve over time to where it's perfect and you can use it day in, day out. And it's a beautiful dashboard that you can see the progress of your business. Oh, there's one more thing I forgot, Eswani. I didn't mention as we're talking about gaps. How do you fill the gaps in cash flow? We talk about talking to your clients, reducing expenses, pushing off purchases is another thing. Also talking to your contractors or your team members about delaying payments. That's a tough conversation to have. It's something you should have up front. Like, hey, this is where we are now. If your cash flow isn't steady, have that conversation up front as to, I learned that the hard way. Have it quick and be as transparent as necessary. This is something that you can do. But if you have to have that conversation when times are good, treat those people like, special. Give bonuses. I learned this from a good friend of mine, Bill Rebello. Whenever someone does great, they get an instant bonus, financial. Like it doesn't have to be huge. It's recognition, and here's an hour's work of, I get free hour, and you get that financially as quickly as possible. And I say to my team, we net $1 million, we're all flying to Jamaica, and I'm serious. And just those incentives will help people to stay longer. Another thing that I'm thinking of implementing for our team is a profit sharing process, whereas they're now invested and they understand, yep, we're not doing well, our cash flow may be low now, but I believe in this company, and when it does well, I'm going to get above and beyond my regular pay. So it's something I'm thinking about. We're figuring out, what that makes sense. And then also bringing in investors, um, whether it's someone that you're giving equity, which should be your last, probably someone you give shares, but then it would mean your company has to be at least a corporation, LLC, or something like that. And then finally, debt, just borrowing money. I think you should do this very cautiously. Usually, my banker friend Desmond would say, borrow more than you need, because in the
Yes.
beginning, you may be paying
Yes.
back the debt with the debt. And also bear in mind that investors only or usually invest in you when you don't need them, right? Investors usually invest for growth, but not so much
Oh,
for sustainability, unless you just have that magical product or service,
got it.
right? So just some things to keep in mind.
Very good. Uh, Kimberly, you ready to go to Jamaica?
I'm ready to go to Jamaica.
Let's go to Jamaica.
Let's go to Jamaica. Sounds good. Thank you very, very much for just this conversation. I'm going to hand it back over to Kimberly.
Thank you, Zwani.
Thank you so much, you guys, for sharing your thoughts on cash flow management for micro businesses. I'm sure this will be for them as they venture forth. If you have any questions, you can contact either Keno Mullings, Dr. Aswani, or myself through the Micro Business Association of New England on LinkedIn. We're all members there. So you can also contact me directly at Kimberly_Madden@hotmail.com. Thank you so much and have a great day.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.